Good afternoon and welcome to a very special interview show of the Prode. India's Act East policy marks a major shift from the earlier Look East policy, moving beyond economic ties to a more active role in regional security, diplomacy, and connectivity. At the core of this strategy are the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a key maritime asset that strengthens India's naval presence, trade routes, and strategic influence in the Indo-Pacific. With China's growing assertiveness through the Belt and Road Initiative and its expanding military footprint, India's position in the Andaman Sea acts as a crucial counterbalance, reinforcing partnerships with ASEAN, the Quad, and other Indo-Pacific allies. As global power dynamics shift, India must blend infrastructure, defense, trade, and culture diplomacy into its Act East strategy to secure long term leadership and influence in the region. To discuss India's Act East policy and its broader implications, I'm honored to have with me today General A.K. Singh, former Lieutenant Governor of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and former Chief of India's Indian Army's Southern Command. With his vast experience and strategic insights, he will help us uncover the critical role of India's maritime strategy in shaping regional geopolitics. Thank you so much for your time and a very warm welcome to the show.
Welcome, Prithvi.
Sir, I would
Go
like
ahead.
Sir, I would like to begin the discussion by asking that how does India's Act East policy differ from earlier Look East policy, and what role do Andaman and Nicobar Islands play in the strategic shift?
Right. Prithvi, till the 80s, India was generally more aligned to the Soviet bloc and Soviet way of doing things. Okay. And it was in 1991 under the Prime Minister, Mr. Narasimha Rao, and Shri Manmohan Singh as the finance minister that liberalization started setting in. And they started looking beyond India's shores. And as an part of that, the Look East policy was formulated in 1991, basically to improve economic collaboration with the countries of ASEAN, Southeast Asia, and in the bargain also give a fillip to India's Northeast. Now, this policy continued, uh, partly successful, partly not, till 2014 when Prime Minister Modi took charge. And coinciding with that, we shifted from a look east policy to an act east policy. So the first difference is that the look east policy was confined only to economic collaboration, whereas the act east policy expanded the scope to infrastructure, to security and defense. Political and strategic issues were brought in and started having an overbearing influence. Okay. Second difference was that in 1991, India's economy was slightly fragile. We were just shifting to a liberalized regime. But in 2014, India's economy had become much stronger, thereby giving India the heft to formulate the Act East policy and follow through. The next thing was that China, in the meantime, had become a very dominant player, of course, worldwide, but with a focus to Indo-Pacific. And there was a requirement to balance this out, which a lot of nations thought that India was the only one who could balance it out. So these were the major differences between the Look East and Act East policy.
Yeah, now coming to the evolving power dynamics. So, with Asia's evolving power dynamics, how do the Andaman and Nicobar Islands enhance India's naval presence and regional influence under the Act East policy? You yourself has served as the Lieutenant Governor. So, what are your insights on the issue?
So, Ritvik, let me first give an overview. The eastward shift of economic centers of gravity from Europe to Asia and Pacific has been ongoing. And this has resulted in not only American shift of focus, but also a greater importance to the countries of the Indo-Pacific region. Now, if you look at Andaman Nicobar Islands, they straddle the Bay of Bengal, 750 kilometers north to south and about 50 to 75 kilometers in width. More importantly, they dominate the sea lanes of communication that pass through the 6-degree and 10-degree channels, and then they pass through the Malacca Straits. So, in a way, India is sitting right on top of Malacca Straits, through which I think almost 60% of world's shipping passes through. Therefore, in my view, Andaman Nicobar are in a unique position to give a fillip to India's Act East policy and also provide the thread which seems to unite the Indian Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. Now, if you know Andamans, 30% of India's exclusive economic zone lies in and around Andamans. 25% of India's coastline lies there. And there are Andamans and Nicobar are a group of almost 600 plus islands, out of which only 37 are inhabited. The unique thing is that as of today, there is no maritime boundary dispute that India has with reference to the Andaman Nicobar Islands with any other country. Most of these issues have been resolved amicably. And therefore, in my view, Andaman Nicobar is an ideal fulcrum for India's Act East policy, as also a springboard which can provide us security of the whole region.
Yeah. Now coming to China's role. So, given China's expanding Belt and Road Initiative and military assertiveness, does India's maritime positioning, especially through the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, offer a credible counterbalance?
Uh, in some ways, yes. Uh, what China has done through its BRI initiative, and earlier the string of pearls that they have created collaborations with number of nations both to India's south and north. Okay. Now, for India to counter that has to be based on China's supply lines, which run through the Indian Ocean into the Pacific Ocean. 60% of China's oil and other trade passes through there. And sitting right there, theoretically, are the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So, in a way, yes, it's a counterweight to what China is doing to us in the north and south, and Andaman Nicobar can play a very, very useful role in countering that.
Yeah, as you mentioned, India, Andaman and Nicobar can play a huge role. So, how can India leverage the islands to strengthen trade and connectivity with Southeast Asia? And what infrastructural and diplomatic efforts are needed to unlock their full potential? And how
Right.
do you see the role of West and United States and the collaboration between India and the West in the whole situation?
Ritwich, to be frank, we have been very tardy in trying to develop the Andaman Nicobar Islands as a springboard. For a long time, we had a fortress mentality in Andaman. There were so many islands spread over 750 kilometers. But today, India is an emerging nation with a good economy, defense, and other assets, including maritime part. And therefore, it's time that India changes its outlook from a fortress economy to a springboard. And as you would know, that trade often happens, the best means of trade is maritime. overland trade is quite tedious, especially now. If you see, while India has managed to settle its northeast and it's quite peaceful and developing under Prime Minister Modi. But if you look at the countries which are in the neighborhood, Bangladesh, the latest, Myanmar, so you see all these countries are in great turmoil. And therefore, the infrastructure projects that were envisaged through these countries will take some time to fructify. And therefore, India has the best alternative to pursue its trade and other initiatives through Andaman Nicobar Islands. Just to reinforce what I am saying, it takes 2 hours to fly from any major airfield on the Indian eastern seaboard into Andaman. And it takes only 30 minutes to get to Southeast Asia from Andaman Nicobar. So I think we need to give a renewed focus. It's not easy to do business in Andaman Nicobar. There is an island mentality. Uh, and I must say that I did try to push entrepreneurship into Andamans, but the rules and regulations are quite prohibitive. Though I'm told that latest initiatives are beginning to bear fruit. We have just had a direct flight from Southeast Asia landing at Andaman Nicobar, just 30 minutes away, and we don't even have a direct flight. Then there are initiatives being planned at Great Nicobar for a port terminal, etc. But that is mired slightly into green and tribal controversy. But there is enough scope in Andaman to create a transshipment terminal where big ships can come offload into smaller ships, which can feed the complete BIMSTEC region or the Bay of Bengal region. Uh, Andaman, what presently we are doing both from a strategic defense and economic point of view is that we are developing infrastructure, including airfields and ports, so that as we move forward, the infrastructure is present to take care of such initiatives.
Yeah, now coming to the security angle of it. So, how should India utilize its Andaman-based military assets to enhance Indo-Pacific security while navigating relationship with Quad, ASEAN, as well as China?
Before that, let me state a general idea. Security in Indo-Pacific means different things to different people. Okay. While bigger countries talk of security in its traditional nuance, these smaller island nations, for them, security is climate change. For them, security is illegal migration. For them, so there is a difference of perception. But let's come to the main line for security. China is over domineering in the South Pacific region and ASEAN region, South China Sea included. Now, while the Quad has been formulated with China in keeping China in view, it has not been stated so directly, especially by India. We are conscious that we share a long border with China, where there have been face-offs. Number two, we do a huge amount of business with China. And therefore, India does not want to take any open stance which will, let's say, imbalance this delicate relationship. But as far as Andaman Nicobar is concerned, defense and strategy always looks at the future possibilities. And therefore, what India is focused on presently is not to build up defense capability in Andaman, but to build up infrastructure which could be utilized by our defense forces as and when the need arises. India has sufficient amount of defense forces and they can be moved to Andaman. both the land component, sea component, and the air component. As I had stated earlier, there is no maritime dispute. So a traditional threat of that nature doesn't arise. But there are a whole lot of issues of illegal migration, the boat people coming in, and then you have people poaching, etc. There is some understated threat about terrorism too, and for that India is a major security provider in collaboration with all the countries of the region. So I think India can do a lot to maintaining security and peace in this region.
Yeah, now coming beyond security, so what new dimensions such as economic, cultural, or technological should India integrate into its Act East strategy to maintain long-term regional influence?
See, the Act East strategy, of course, the prime focus is economic collaboration and cooperation. India's trade with ASEAN and further east with other countries hasn't reached its potential, and there is great potential to develop that further. India also did not join the RCEP grouping, and I think in future could think of something like that. Culturally, there is great affinity between the countries of ASEAN and further east with India, with a thread of Buddhism running right through. Uh, Tourism has a great potential. Andaman is one of the best hotspots in the world today. Pristine beaches, forests, tribes are there, and the government has taken a lot of steps to not only maintain the environment but also to protect the tribals, the primitive tribes who live in Andaman. Andaman also, there has to be a balance. You cannot go overboard in pushing tourism. There is a carrying capacity that the island has. And so, my policy when I was there was to increase tourism, but in a manner that Andaman doesn't get overloaded. And I think we succeeded in doing that.
Yeah. So, in the context of shifting global geopolitics, where do you see India's policy heading, especially compared to maritime issues? And how can its maritime outreach through the Andaman and Nicobar Islands shape its future's role in Indo-Pacific?
Right. Uh, Indo-Pacific is the emerging arena of geoeconomics and geopolitics. China is one center, and you have the United States focus now shifting to Asia Pacific. And there are other countries, including India. We are part of, we are a partner country with ASEAN. We are also part of the Quad. And we maintain friendly relations also with China. Now, to maintain this omni alignment, as India says, is not easy. And sometimes maintaining omni alignment, you are dealt only half the cards. But that's a policy that India has found fruitful. Even now, you see in the Ukraine, with the Ukraine conflict going and American sanctions, India has found a good balance between pursuing its interests vis-a-vis Western nations and Russia. So, as I see, India will remain a key player in the Indo Pacific. Our geographical location, our population, our economic potential, and above all, our defense forces, including the Indian Navy, their potency ensures that India will remain a key player in Indo Pacific. And India, the government has a policy for while our focus is on the land borders, but the government is also pursuing the development of our maritime capability, not only the navy, but other maritime assets as well.
Yeah, General Saab, your insights have been invaluable in understanding the evolving dynamics of India's Act East policy and the role of Andaman and Nicobar Islands in securing India's strategic, economic, and diplomatic interests in the Indo-Pacific. So, thank you so much for your time, and it was a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you.